All garage stuff. Today is the 7th of March, 2025. I got a laptop in, and the complaint was it was really slow. And I got a laptop in. It's pretty typical of what I find. Okay, I've talked about it in other videos, but what I found was this particular one had never had an update of any kind. Update was turned off, so it took, I don't know, a couple hours to download all the Windows 10 updates for it, as well as all the updated drivers, because they had never been updated. And once I got all that, then got to looking at the hardware side of it, and I had a nice 500 gigabyte solid state drive. Slow. What's it slow about? Memory. It only had 4 gigabytes of memory on it, and Windows was eating up 3 point something gigabytes of the 4. So trying to do anything was page crazy. Most applications wouldn't fit in memory without some portion of it being paged out to the hard drive and then had to come back in. Even though it was a solid state drive, the thing was just boggy as all I got out. When I looked up the specifications for that specific computer, it gave me a long model number. It said it could take a maximum of 8. And then when I looked around more on the internet, it said no, it can take a maximum of 16. 2 8 gigabyte memory modules would work on it. I don't know. So I've taken the back cover off to see what it's really got, and lo and behold, it's only got one memory stick in it, one module of memory. And yeah, it could be upgraded to 8 gigabytes, and I did buy like $10. At least up the amount of memory that it had. That seemed to help a lot. All of the power settings, because it's a laptop, all the power settings were set to balanced. The idea was in a laptop, the designers, the makers, the people who set the defaults, since it's a laptop, they think it's going to be used most of the time under, or a good portion of the time, under battery. So they try to find a balance. There are power settings inside you can change and adjust. And one of the things I did was set everything to high power. I'm gonna press the processors to never go to sleep, the screen to never go to sleep, that the disk is never turned off. I'm going to set all that stuff so that it's always running, because the laptop is always plugged in when it's being used. So there's no real need for all of this power monitoring and reducing and cutting. It was put in for when battery use comes into play. That's what it was all about. So I changed all that to speed everything up. Let's see, there are other settings in there that I played with besides the power. Oh well, part of power is how long do you wait before you turn this off, or I said everything never. Screen never gets turned off, the processor does get turned off. And from the performance point of view, it's set for high performance, not eco this or that. There are a bunch of Toshiba utilities on the system, and one of them was supposed to let me see if there were any BIOS updates, but I could never get it to run. It's like the website that you're directed to from Toshiba just isn't there. I even went to Toshiba and tried to look around, and I could find some stuff, but then it would never download it. I don't know if there was something in the firewall that prevented it or whatever. There was like 6 or 8 Toshiba utilities on the thing. The only one I could get to work was their Eco, which had to do with even reducing the power of the system even farther to save the CO2 pollution in the air because of the charging the battery from a coal-powered source or whatever. Anyway, I got all the updates in. I got all the correct drivers installed. I put max amount of memory in it, which is only 8 gigabytes, and that has to be an absolute minimum for running Windows of any kind. You need really way more than that, as much as you can get. What else did I do to it? I took off some extraneous junk, including Norton. Norton was on here, and the lady was paying $295 a year for Norton. And from my experience over the years, Norton is a big CPU cycle hog. It literally, before you try to do anything, it acts like it actually is watching every read or write from the disk to see if it's got spyware in it. It's as if the user is potentially, he's guilty. That's the way it looks like to me Norton is set up, is everybody who touches the thing is a criminal, and you got to watch out for the computer. Even with the user, if you set up Task Manager and look at it, Norton is always up there eating up CPU cycles and disk stuffing back and forth to the disk. And I talked to the lady about it. She had no problem. She didn't want to spend $295 for another year, and it was coming up for renewal. So I took it off and used the Windows antivirus that is inherent in Windows now. You can use that. You don't have to use Norton. Now, once upon a time, there was a need for a Norton type antivirus on Windows. It didn't have it. It's like a lot of things. At one time, Windows did not have a built-in defrag on hard drives. It does now. Once upon a time, it didn't have this or that, but it has acquired those particular aspects that somebody invented and incorporated into Windows. A lot of stuff's incorporated in Windows, including the antivirus that runs schedule every day and checks everything. Well, it checks the areas most likely to have gotten or pulled in an antivirus, like email, or perhaps something that was plugged into USB ports, things like that. It checks those areas. You can go into the antivirus and adjust how much you want scanned. I did set it up and had a full hard drive scan. That means it read every file on that hard drive to see if it had any virus signatures. Now, in this particular case, because of 8 gigabytes of memory, still seemed a little slow to me, but it's got a relatively slow dual processor in it. It took like 12 hours to totally scan 200 gigabytes of hard drive space, but there were no viruses found. I don't normally do that, but in this case, who knows. But Norton came off. That's one of the aspects. Got rid of that CPU hog, and it definitely eats up CPU cycles like crazy. I'm not saying it's a bad product. It just has side effects that you have to be aware of, including the money aspect of it. What else did I have to do to it? The USB port's fine. I did make a recovery USB drive for it. I did copy all of the data, her data that was stored in the old Microsoft stock videos, photos, document folders that I talked about before, and how you save those off a C drive. All of her data was in there somewhere. I found it. I copied it off to a USB hard drive, 1 terabyte USB hard drive. I used that same 1 terabyte hard drive to make up system images of the PC1 before I ever started anything. So I had it there in case I fumbled. And 2, once I had gotten all of the updates on it, I found out that it was stuck, like a lot of them are, with Windows 11 or 10, whatever, I don't know what they're doing, 22H2. means it had not gotten the major upgrade that occurred in the fall of 2024 because it didn't meet some of the hardware requirements. Besides TPM and whatever it was, it didn't have enough processor horsepower. It wasn't, I don't know. Anyway, there is an easy enough workaround for it, and I had no problem installing 24H2 on this old, it's not that old, it's a 2018 Toshiba laptop. I didn't have any problem getting it on there. I'm having a problem with my light over here though. It doesn't like to be, something's not, doesn't like the voltage changing, but anyway, I did manage to get 24H2 on it, and then I had to do the updates again. Go to Windows, check updates, and there were a ton of those. Since 24H2 has been released, there has been a ton of updates to NetFrame and the various other portions of the I don't know why that light bulb isn't like update to whatever you want to call Windows 11 now. So that was the overall thing. It took me probably a total of 20 hours. Now I wasn't doing, to do an update, you sit around and do other things because it can take an hour or two to do a Windows update. And this is the other issue I found out. Yeah, it looked like the motherboard supported Wi-Fi. There was no plug dongle or anything in it. And when I got to checking, yes, the motherboard did support Wi-Fi, but only to the G, the slowest speed. The slowest speed you can have Wi-Fi, that's what the board supported. And looking at the driver for it, no, you had no option to do G and N or any other version of Wi-Fi. So I found I have a dongle that does all the upper speeds. I plugged that in and it seemed to work fine. So when I took it back to the lady, I explained to her that, the motherboard is running at the slowest Wi-Fi speed you can get, and that's part of the performance issue. When lo and behold, she went and set the laptop down right by her router. So no, you don't use Wi-Fi when you have a Ethernet port on your computer and you have Ethernet ports on the back of your router. So I said, okay, I'll be back. So I came home and got an Ethernet cable and I plugged the laptop directly into her router, and I went into networking options and turned off the 11.B or whatever, the slowest speed Wi-Fi that was built into that motherboard. I didn't even know they did that at that speed. In 2018 they did that. Anyway, she no longer uses Wi-Fi. She's directly Etherneted to her router and should have the 1 gigabit per second link rate. I didn't check it, but it should be set at that rate, and she did get on the internet after that, and certainly had internet connection directly to the router, not to Wi-Fi. So that's some of the stuff I found, and if you ever playing around with some computer, you can look at all these aspects. There are various things that impact performance. The built-in Wi-Fi could be one of them. The power settings inside of Windows is another one, particularly if it's a laptop. And there are a lot of other things you can change and change the settings to make it have a little more oomph to it. And whatever antivirus, if you're using a third-party antivirus, you might want to think about dumping it, especially if you have to pay a lot of money for it, or whoever it is that owns a laptop, if they will accept the fact that Microsoft antivirus will take care of the problem. You don't need to be concerned. My view is if anybody knows about viruses, it's Microsoft, because they're always making changes to Windows because they found some sort of back door. Someone found a way to get in, and so they've modified the code. That was the other thing. I told you she had never had any updates. She had Microsoft Office 2003 on this computer. And when I clicked it over and said I want all Microsoft updates, then 2003 had 30 updates, I don't know, a ton of them to do, of which one would not go. No matter how many times I tried to retry it, it would not go. And when I looked on the web, it said blah, 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 blah. One of the suggestions was go to Microsoft and find that particular error message, and then you'll find a, I think it's called a knowledge base article about it. It had to do with the 2003 Office, and they suggested you download this, which I did, and then run it right. I was in the download folder, and then to run it as a administrator. Once I did that, it properly fixed the problem, but it would not download and install off of Microsoft web server in the sky. So sometimes you run into things like that. There's some sort of, I mean, it hadn't been updated forever since it got first built. So all the drivers, all of the old programs and applications, I don't think she had a lot of other applications on it. I did not go into each and every one and see if there was an update available to it. There probably was, and eventually when she's using it, it'll probably come up and say, hey, you want to get the latest updates? And hopefully she says yes. A lot of people, when they see that little notification down there and it says, this needs an update, they don't do it. They're afraid it's a virus. So they don't do it, and then they miss out on whatever. This is too long again. This is Uncle Ron stuff. This has about, over the years, I've probably repaired 100 PCs, some desktops, laptops. I don't do well on iPhones and iPads. They're too delicate, and I don't do well on those. But on the bigger stuff, you got more hand room and soldering room and all kinds of things. I've probably done at least 100 of them over the years. And this is a pretty typical example. One interesting aspect I found out about it was a Toshiba. It has no system fan. There's no fan in it. It was built. There is a conducting sort of structure put over what is obviously the microprocessor. But there was a place for a fan to fit in there, but there's no fan in it. So obviously the CPU doesn't get all that hot, or the video chip don't get all that hot. I don't think I've run across one that doesn't have a fan in it. It's bizarre. I can't believe that it was ever taken out. The specifications for this particular PC, by the way, off the web, said it had a 5400 RPM SATA 500 gigabyte drive. And that is not what I found in it. It has a 500 gigabyte solid state drive. I asked her if it ever had been swapped out. She said it was her husband's computer. She had no idea. It's possible that it had been swapped out at once upon a time, because according to the specs from Toshiba, it didn't come with that. It came with a 5400 RPM hard drive. And that's one of the things you want to check if you're working on one of these things, because you don't want a 5400 RPM hard drive for anything. For a C drive or a D drive, you don't want one of those. At least a 7200 RPM drive, and better yet, a solid state drive if that's going to be your C drive and you're going to run applications off of it. Uncle Ron stuff, this is enough for today. I'll add it when I can get to it.